Welcome to another episode of Tandaza Mkeka. And with me today, I have two very special guests, and we're very, very glad to have them here. Today, we're going to be digging deeper into what funding means, what it looks like, decolonizing aid, funding, direct funding and indirect funding, and what that looks like. And with us today are two special guests, and we're going to really think through or look into how far we've come as Unmothering from the point of view of Carol, and our future from the point of view of Maureen. And welcome, ladies. Would you like to introduce yourself and let us know, or let the viewers or listeners know what you're doing here in terms of Unmothering the Woman?
Thank you, Ami. My name is Caroline Kioko. I'm here in very many hearts. First, let me start with one of the hearts. I was working for Heinrich Böll Foundation when Unmothering the Woman started, and I was privileged to be part of the people who started working on Unmothering with Amina and started funding Unmothering. Two, Unmothering the Woman holds a very special place in my heart. So I'm here as an Unmothering the Woman champion, but also in my other capacity as somebody who works in the funding space and somebody who has passion in gender and inclusion for development.
Thank you, Amina and Caro. Always good to be sitting with the two of you. It really is always good to be sitting with the two of you. My name is Maureen. Like Amina said, currently I do work as a program coordinator at Heinrich Böll Foundation, and we've been supporting Unmothering the Woman through this process. But I'm also here in my capacity as someone who is very vocal about championing for gender issues, especially in societal structures where are very restrictive for different gender groups. Also, I have been a part of the Unmothering Season 1, and in the back end supporting Amina and the rest of the team in regards to the direction and strategy that Unmothering wants to take. Yeah.
Thank you both. And again, I'm also very happy to have both of you here. This is the first time I think this has ever happened. So I'll start with the first question, the journey so far. A lot of people usually ask me, how did you start Unmothering? How did that happen? Where did this idea come from? And I always tell them the story about how I looked at this newspaper one day, and it was telling the story about this woman who was being denied entry into Pumwani, and she had to give birth outside. And I remember us meeting the first time in a cafe somewhere, and me telling you about this awesome. I was like, this documentary on reproductive health in maternal health in Kenya must be done. And that was pre-COVID, I think.
Yeah.
And I was so excited, and I came and I told you, and you were looking at me like, I don't think so. But then it still happened. Like you still listened to the idea, and then COVID happened. Do you remember what happened after that?
Yes, I do. By the way, I bought the idea.
I remember, and I'll never forget about that.
I bought the idea.
Yes.
And I think thinking back, it was very important for me, and I think it was important for the organization I was working with at that point to start talking about things that are actually close to people's heart. The thing about development and the space and development, you can call it whatever, NGO, civil society, just broadly development, is that sometimes we are too stretched out that we don't resonate with the day-to-day of everybody. So when you told me that story, for me, it hit home. It's like, this is something that people go through every single day. This is the reality of a lot of women in the country. So do I want to keep talking about policies at a high level conversation, or do I want to actually speak to the things that people experience every day and see how we can make that work for people? So I think that's how it came to me. And yes, COVID happened, and COVID. It disoriented all the plans that we had. Yes. I remember the question you're asking, I mean, about how are we going to record? How are we going to be traveling? Well, we are still having masks on. Yeah. It was, it was not the best of the scenarios, and it was very challenging. But I think also COVID came, and COVID changed the way that we were doing things, but it did not quite change the idea and the vision behind Unmothering. It still remained. So for me, Unmothering was, and it still is the reason why I'm passionate about it, the day of every woman in Africa. I would be bold enough to say Africa, but yeah.
Yeah. Could you tell us a bit of why, because I remember when we first had the conversation about the documentary about the reproductive health and all these things that we wanted to challenge at the time, and I was wondering at the time why there was so much alignment with challenging patriarchy.
So I'm a feminist.
And what is it?
Let me start with that. I am a feminist, and I look at my life from a feminist lens, whether I'm working or I'm living my everyday life. So challenging patriarchy is a project, or is a part of the program that I was working on when I was at the Heinrich Ball then, and it was very much focused on looking at feminist policies, feminist in politics, feminist, how does our world actually operate in a feminist way? And that is how challenging patriarchy came about, where we live in a very patriarchal world. I don't need to say that. Everybody knows that. And we live in a world that sometimes, not sometimes, a world that is not favorable to women.
Yeah.
And this is how feminism comes about. It's a lot of things, by the way. This is not what feminism is only, but one of the first steps is that we're trying to make the world better for everybody in it, and particularly for those that are marginalized or those that are vulnerable. And most of the time they tend to be women and girls.
Yeah.
So the conversation about reproductive health and the conversation about the realities of women in motherhood was the most feminist thing at that particular point. And it was telling a story. People resonate with stories. We are not telling you from a policy perspective, you need to challenge patriarchy. We are telling you, this is a story of a woman who is a mother.
Yeah.
If you cannot see the problem with the story she's given, then at this point the problem is you. That was the whole idea about challenging patriarchy and making it come to life and making people actually understand what we're talking about without throwing around the big policy development.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true, because I'm glad that you're here because we can't not talk about the thing that we were trying to do with Unmothering at the time was I always say, we've been saying this, we're not experts. I'm not a maternal health expert. I'm not but I do the work. I do the research and I try and find two different perspectives. The doctor, the expert, the therapist versus the lived experience.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're here because we journeyed not only with Carol, but with you as well, among other women who we interviewed. I want you to reflect back a bit from the time that I came to you and asked, would you like to be a part of this? And you don't need to share your story again. I'm sure everyone has viewed it. I don't even need to repeat it again. Yeah. But your story went viral, and for many reasons, because I think at the time, even me, I was shocked. And I remember telling Carol, we're going to get backlash for some of the stuff that these women are saying. What did you think about me approaching you, asking you to share a huge, vulnerable part of yourself at the time? And what did you think? Did you think you were going to help anyone by sharing your story?
I think first, maybe it's good to give a disclaimer that you and I are friends. And I think in principle, our response is always yes, then we ask questions later. And I don't think you gave me a choice. It was...
No, don't say that in front of people.
And I actually remember saying, okay, fine, yes. I didn't know what I was saying.
And you can come to my house also. That's what you said.
Yeah. I didn't know what I was saying yes to. I was just like, Ami is doing this thing. It sounds dope. Okay, yes, let's do it. And
I remember where you were in life at that time, like job-wise,
work-wise. Still working in the feminist space, but like many people during COVID, I had lost my job because my previous work, my work has always been in working with different gender groups and women especially. And I remember I was home. Everyone was home. It was lockdown, and I kept thinking, how are we going to do this? And I remember asking you later, okay, so do I need to come? How are we doing this? And we ended up shooting at my house, which was also a very big place of comfort for me, because I mean, medically speaking, but also when socially, we were not going anywhere. So it was fine. And I guess being at home made it easier for me to be able to speak very openly on some of the things that I had experienced in trying to figure out what motherhood is for me. And I say that because a lot of us, even across the episode, and we hear it a lot in conversations with women and people who are parents, and those who are able to share, nobody has the right formula for being a mother. Nobody knows what they'll feel towards their child, how they're going to parent this human being, how the child will respond to the parenting. And we've seen it in all the episodes. At the core of it, all these women want is the best for their children. And for me, the work has been important because for the longest time, society keeps defining what the best is for the child and what's the best way the mother can give this to this child. And it doesn't always work. Not all situations are ideal. Not all family setups are equal in that way. Not people's levels of awareness and willingness to give and pour into this other human being, because that's what it means to be a parent.
Yeah.
You forgo so many things about you, yourself, your lifestyle, your ideologies change every single day because you're constantly trying to respond to the needs of your child or children. So walking into this, I didn't know what we're doing. But I had faith. I had faith in what you're doing and in what this could be, even if I didn't see what the big picture was back then. Like you've said, there's been a lot of backlash on some of the content we've put out there. And I see that as such a good thing because we are speaking on the things that people don't speak about. We are speaking on things where people live with, and I use the word shame a lot because shame and fear, for me, are on the same playing field. You feel shameful. You get fear towards speaking up for yourself, towards making choices for yourself. And you stay in very unhealthy situations or spaces just because you think, oh my God, if I go against the grain, then I'm going to be seen as a problem. And with that comes with failure as well. But none of us are failing as mothers. Everyone we've spoken to through this journey is not failing. We are actually doing what it means to be a parent. You're showing up for your children or your child every day. And that should be enough. That should be enough.
So based on that conversation that we've had about being interviewed and talking about backlash, can you think about any stories throughout, because I'm assuming you watched as well, before this current season that we're working with you, that have stood out to you? Because me, when someone asks me if you've faced backlash, may I say no. I usually say no. No backlash. Maybe not to me, but maybe not to the project. But any stories that you can think of? Because I remember some of our very, very intense conversations with Carol was about not wanting, women who don't want to have kids. Was one of her, like, she was just like really, really interested in telling that story. Not from herself, but like one of the stories that we have to tell is this one. I don't know. For you?
I like what you've said about women who have chosen not to have children, because right now that's a big conversation that at least I've been checking online, and I feel bad for the women who've made that choice, because again, it goes to what we're trying to do through this project. We're challenging patriarchy. Why would you impose a very life-changing decision to another person who's very clear and of sound mind that this is a choice that doesn't work for them? Why do we sit from perspectives, especially when we look at this whole family unit setup, all these expectations that society load on women and people in general, because I'm sure the different genders will also get very different societal expectations. But who gives us the right to sit and decide and say, you deserve this kind of life and it has to look in this way and you have to take this without a choice in the matter? To go back to your original question, I think the episode on loss those ones, I think we've done 2, and those 2 have always gotten to me. In as much as my motherhood journey came from, I keep saying I fell into motherhood. There's no plan there. Like I had 3 children and they're there and I have to figure this shit out. And we've talked about it in that episode of how navigating that did not come easy for me. It didn't. So I do understand when somebody says, imagine this is not the choice for me, and it should be okay. Yeah. But at the same time, loss in whatever sense of the word is so hard. It's so hard when you lose your job, when you lose a loved one, when you lose a sibling, when you lose a parent. Loss is heavy. I can't imagine what it's like to carry a living human being for 9 months. And at the end of it, you lose this, you know? And that's why when miscarriages at 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 3 months, stillborns are hard, because immediately you figure out that you're carrying another life. There's an instant connection. So the episodes on loss really got to me. Yeah.
Caro?
It's usually hard for me to speak about a particular episode. I think because I was too much into the entire Unmothering, everything was, oh wow, that's nice. I like this one. It was like in one after the other. But just to start from what you said, it was very, very important for me to speak about women who do not want to have children, who have made the choice to not have children. This is one way of summarizing Unmothering. It's not the only one, but it was very much for me about people understanding what choice looks like and what agency looks like for women. Because when you look at the variety of episodes, it was, I want to have the space to make this choice as a woman. And you don't have that because expectations by society, because there's obligations placed on you that you don't even know where they came from. I also want to, you could see like the lost episodes, I want for people to understand that I also wanted this choice, but several circumstances have happened and people need to respect that and not think of me of a lesser person. You know, I think the entire Unmothering series, all of them, for me was very inspiring to actually just look at different facets of being a woman and how choice is given to you and taken away from you on whim. By society, like you have absolutely no control over that, you know. And I would have to say that looking at women speak up, I mean, Maureen here shared her story, several other people shared their stories. Looking at people find the confidence to actually go on camera and speak about things that they weren't quite sure whether, how is this gonna go? Is my family going to turn back on me? Are my friends going to look at me differently? How is, you know, there are so many question marks, but they still found the courage to stand on camera, to sit on camera and speak about personal stories. Trying to show the world what it looks like to be a woman. And that for me was the most inspiring thing about the entire season, you know, that strength, that passion, and the fact that people resonated. Like you said, there wasn't that much backlash, but there was a lot of solidarity, if you remember. Like people were really coming out, and most of the comments that people were coming up with were, oh wow, that was really bold. Oh wow, that was, you know, that was getting to me. It was very nice for me to see that, because it told me that there's a lot that needs to happen when it comes to women sharing stories of how abused, I can use abused, and vulnerable they have been in society. And everybody assumes that women are, you know, brazen out here, you know. It's all easy on you. There's nothing difficult.
And they need to be heard as well.
They need to be heard.
Like the need just to have someone listen to you, give you a space to just let you say what you need to say. I think that was also very important in that sisterhood trying to thing that you were trying to do at the time. But then I think the thing that I would say, even not even, because I literally participated in all, like I was there for all the interviews. And I remember one thing that I'll share my inspiring story later. I was sitting in the interview because we did yours and Jerry's almost at the same time. I was not there for yours, but I was there for Jerry's. And she said something, and that's the day that I called Caro and I told her, we are going to be removed from Instagram and
what did
all
you
the
say?
platforms. I don't know if we're going to be able to air this episode this is crazy. She literally said the words, I regret having my 3 kids.
I remember. Yes, I remember.
I didn't want them. I didn't want to have them at this time. I didn't want, and I was like, for me, my heart I just felt like, no, this is where we're going to be cancelled by everyone. But those 2 episodes went viral. The fact that, I don't know, I think it was like validation from people to say, I don't know, that it's okay to not want kids, it's okay to not have kids. Like that hit home for people. Yeah. But that was not my most inspiring episode.
Yeah. For me, I mean, before you go to your most inspiring episode, just on that story, maybe I forgot to mention how it can appear like when we were doing Unmothering that we also were okay. But it's important to mention that you and I went through our own growth, listening to all the episodes and watching all the episodes and looking at the realities around the episodes. Like, it was a major growth for me. Yeah. And I'm grateful to the people who shared, and actually the fact that was existent.
Yeah. Because it was a lot. And we kept on saying that it was a lot. I remember working with someone else on season 2, and we were trying to bring in the aspect of psychosocial help, like support. And we just didn't know how to do it, because a lot of people were reaching out to us to ask us, I am going through X. Can you help me? And I'm like, babes, even me, I don't know how to, I don't know how to navigate through this. And that was the thing that I kept on telling Carol at the time. We're opening up wounds. We're letting people speak up, but we're not directing them to places where they can get this help. Yeah. Because we cannot give them the help that they need. So it was really troubling for me to be able to, yes, tell your story, but then, no, I cannot support you much further than this. It was really, really hard for me, very traumatic, listening to the stories. And on top of that, it was a lot for us. For the growth that Carol has just said. Because for me, I'm not the same person from 2020. I am not the same person. I've navigated through life and unmothered myself. Maybe not successfully, but tried throughout this. So one of the aha moments, and I usually call them aha moments, like when you're listening to something or watching something and your mind just shifts like a Lego, like this. I was watching the first season 1, episode 1 was an influencer. Who was telling us about why she does not put her kids on social media. She shows them, but she doesn't show their faces. A couple of weeks after that, I was in the supermarket and my daughter came and told me, Mom, someone just came and says she knows me and told me to say hi to your mom. She called me by my name and told me to say hi to your mom. And I was like, do you know that person? She's like, no, I've never met her. And I was like, this is what that lady was saying. That was season 1, episode 1. Like it took me, I don't know, like it took that moment and then that regretting episode. And then we had this amazing episode with Silas Miami when we were talking about mother wounds. And in Mombasa a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about silencing and racism in places where you don't think. Let me tell you, it's like you open up a box and there's no one left, like who supports the storyteller. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the kind of growth and the journey that we've come from. But I want to bring you back. We're still in the journey of where we came from. Yeah. Finally, we've come back. We've gone through this journey with Carol and Maureen. You were once interviewee. Now you're part of Unmothering. Can you tell us about that journey? How that journey was for you?
I think
it still is.
Yeah. I'll take it back to the beginning. Like I didn't know what we were walking into. And like you've said, the series has changed us in ways we didn't imagine. You've talked about unmothering yourself. I think I've gotten to a point of acceptance. And this will sound strange given the work that I've done in the past and generally how I try to be. I think a lot of the prejudices we have or the biases we have against others is because we don't understand their choices. And Caro said agency and choice. And I think I've found it easier to navigate life now when I accept things for what they are. Yeah. Even in my parenting journey right now, there's so many things the kids do and I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, you know.
I'm supposed to say that.
Guess we leave it in.
But then I realized the more I resist and fight and try to stamp authority and control, it's a losing battle. It's a losing battle. And I'm not saying you throw discipline and caution out the window, but I've really learned to accept that sometimes things are just the way they are. Yeah. What I'm hoping to see even in the future for Unmothering is for us as an institution or as a platform to still, like you said, keep that space open for anyone who walks into it. Not try and predetermine what that looks like. Of course, we have strategy. We have to strategize and see how does this grow into an entity that serves its purpose. But I think for me, it would be to accepting that this is what it is now. Season 1 looked very different from season 2. Who'd have thought that, we'd be doing an audiovisual podcast. We didn't see that at the beginning. It was just a response measure to a news article, to someone who bought into the idea. But here we are having intergenerational conversations on silencing. Yet all we started with is that this is how I mother and this is what my experience has been. So I'm hoping Unmothering continues to keep its doors open and accept that this is the community we are in now.
And I think we hadn't made it clear to the people who are listening or viewing that you are now currently the funder, our funder. But more on that later. More on that later. But Carol, being in the funding space and seeing how you've come with Unmothering, this journey that we've been on and where we are right now in season 4, you in the funding space, being in the funding space, what do you think that looked like? Because you bought into an idea. You decided to fund that idea in whatever capacity, whether it's effort or money or whatever. In the funding realm, what does that look like? What if you hadn't done it? Or what if you did do it differently? What does that look like for you?
It's maybe I'll start by saying that fortunately or unfortunately, pick whichever. I have been in the funding space for a while now, long enough to actually say that I know how the funding space operates. And it's unfortunate that Unmothering the Woman is not the idea that funders will be jumping at, because projects for funders look a certain way. They have to have these numbers, they have to have these particular people, they have to conform to a narrative that the funders have created for a long period of time. And meeting you the way I met you, you were not an organization, you did not have a board, there was just an idea, and that was that. And the idea was making sense in the society and community that we live in. And I think that is the biggest missing piece in funding. We are not, and I say we, because I'm still a funder, we are not quite funding what community and society needs. We're funding what we need as funders. And that is a problem.
So funders are funding themselves?
No.
Funders are funding what they think is
a picture of what is ideal to them. Like you have to paint a picture of what they have in mind, like as what should be funded.
Meeting criteria, meeting objectives, meeting,
And also a certain thematic, like, there's this, the world operates in a very weird space. So we have so many challenges, and the challenges are not by themselves. They're very connected. But the idea that one challenge is bigger than the other is what fascinates me. We are now in an era where funders are climate changing, You want to speak about sexual reproductive health rights, but put in climate change. It has to fit somewhere in there, Now we are also moving into these fancy buzzwords that funders are using. No, I'm not saying, but that's the thing. Climate change is not important. But sexual reproductive rights is also important. We don't have to fund one over the other, but we also don't have to force people to conform to what theme you think is a lot more important in your mind. That's the idea. We need to give space for people to address different problems from different sides. You know, that's the whole point. But also now, I've moved from mainstream funding, from political funding to philanthropy. And it's so funny how the buzzwords come around, Now we are funding not just themes, but words. you want to get money, then your proposals need to read a certain way. Do you have participatory approaches? Do you, are you, you know, you need to throw these, you don't need to mean them. That's the thing. That's the most frustrating.
That
exactly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for me, this is how Unmothering the Woman and related any other concept that is an idea that fits the society will never get funding, because I have to come ask you questions that don't make sense in the name of due diligence. You know, and it's unfortunate that I have to be literally checking boxes. And if you don't check those boxes, it does not matter how good the story was. You're not getting money. And that is what we need to move away from. And that's what funding needs to completely move away from. If you're going to make any change, any difference in society, we need to start funding ideas that are community born, that are community-led, and that resonate with the people in whatever community you're working in. And they do not need to fit into your ideal picture. They don't need to be an organization. Friends, we have too many organizations. We don't need any more organizations. They do not need to have 20 manuals on governance, on policy, on human resource, and whatever other stories. They just need to have the idea.
You tell us a bit about decolonizing aid.
That's
manifesto that you wrote.
Well, it was not a manifesto.
I know.
But that was the reason why I sat down and I was like, okay, I have my job as a funder, but I also have Caroline. What speaks to me? And since I've been in the development space for too long, I know the advantages of development and the disadvantages of development. And I also know the face that development has put. And that face does not speak to me as a Kenyan in whatever village I come from. It really doesn't resonate with me. It's a picture that looks very movie-like, development needs to look in this certain way. So I had to ask myself, what is my input? And since I have been working with a lot of people who lead organizations who are in this space on development, how can I put their voices? How can I amplify their voices on what development needs to look like? Now, the funny part is, when you talk about decolonizing, when you hear the word decolonizing, what comes to mind is changing something from a colonial approach. Common sense would dictate that the people who are facing the colonization would want to speak about how they want to be decolonized or how they want the decolonization to look like. Common sense. But reality is, the people who have been accused of colonization are the ones speaking about decolonization.
And funding.
And they have also painted this picture of decolonization that doesn't resonate with us, you know? And that is where I came in. I was like, no, we need to hear African voices, particularly Kenyan voices, on what decolonization looks like to them and what even the colonization looks like to them when it comes to development. Hence the paper that I wrote. It was literally just highlighting what do we mean when you talk about change and funding? What are the challenges that people are going through day to day? We don't care about buzzwords. How can these challenges be solved? What are the solutions? What do people on the ground want when it comes to funding?
And I think I want to bring that conversation even to a smaller scale. And small, I don't mean a lesser scale, just breaking it down from a policy level perspective, from a paper to practicalities of what that would look like. I think one of the things that I really learned from Carol stepping into this role was you can choose two things. You can choose to sit there, tick boxes, and you'll still get the work done. But you can also make a difference, even despite the challenges that we get that come with a very prescribed way of supporting partners. And intentionally, and I must give credit, directly to our current office director, because that was the first thing I told him during the interview. Like, if you're looking for someone to just tick boxes, then I'm not the person for you. And he's been very gracious in allowing for us within our portfolio to experiment, because we still have to adhere to very strict funding guidelines. We still, do due diligence. But then I think what Kara is describing in practical sense needs to be put into practice. For example, in how we've worked with Unmothering, the first thing for me was transparency, letting him know that this is the level of involvement I have with this organization, and then being very clear what are the boundaries within that working relationship that would allow for the organization to still support the work that Unmothering is doing. Secondly is being intentional about working with partners. A lot of the time, you'll put out a call for applications or a grant application. You give a deadline. You define how this document has to read, what it must contain, what you're hoping to see in the proposal. And then the person on the other side, let's assume is a young organization, probably with not the right capacity in terms of human resources to get this done. And of course, the due diligence box. Do you have this policy? Do you have a safeguarding thing? Do you have this? Do you have a head? What does your team comprise of? How inclusive is it? Like, there's so many boxes for this organization to check, and then they may not tick all of them.
Yeah.
But then, and why I say the responsibility then comes back to us is because you can choose to receive that application and put it under the table, or you can look at that application and say, here, I see a good idea. Could it be formulated better? Probably. Are there things we need to strengthen before we can proceed to work together? Probably. Is it impossible to support that organization? No, it isn't. There has to be a willingness from the other side of the table to say, okay, we recognize this organization has one, for example, been able to run campaigns, is doing work within the community, is very active in the digital space, has 2-3 concrete team members, whether they're volunteers or not, who are able and can demonstrate their ability to deliver on certain projects. Then you hold that partner's hand. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things we've changed for the portfolio or try to improve this year. We have a lot of young organizations, especially in the challenging patriarchy document, who don't fit the bill when it looks at this is the structure or the framework that the development world uses to assess a partner. It's an experiment. Let's see how the year goes. But I can confidently say that they're able to deliver. I think it's taking a chance on organizations in that level and helping them realize, okay, I may not have say a safeguarding policy. I may not have a gender inclusion policy, but I know what it means to be inclusive. I know what it means to safeguard the communities that we work with, including my own team. I know what it means to be able to account for every shilling, dollar, euro that I get. And it also builds the confidence in them to also come back and tell you, actually, we don't know how to do this. Can you help us do this? Because the thing about the donor relationship with the organizations that get the money, I'm trying to avoid to use typical politically correct words. And I say this after speaking on 3 sides of the table. I have been a resource mobilization person. I have looked for money and it's not easy. I have been in the implementation conversation where you have received funding and you had this good idea, but your idea is getting lost because you have to do everything in the way that the donor requires you to do it. And now I'm on this other side of the conversation where every other day somebody is asking you for money. And I see that as an advantage because I know what it means to have that proposal rejected. And then it comes, if you're lucky to get a rejection notice, but also no explanation why it was rejected. But I've also been in that space where you have this expectation loaded over you and you feel like your idea is dying every day. The good work is dying every day because you have to adhere to these policies. And now on the other side, I'm like, we can't be the problem again. We really can't be the problem. So this year has been an experiment in how do we bridge that gap. And then you can't ignore the power dynamics between the person who has the money and the person who needs the money. It has to be a very direct and intentional practice to shift that power back into the hands of the people who do the work. But how do you do that? You have those conversations. You go for meetings. You go for the activities. You do reviews. And you actually, it's not like a teacher headmaster kind of thing. You actually sit and talk and evaluate, hey, what's working? What's not working? What have you learned? Because I look at it as a learning experience. If you're not learning from each other,
and I think that's the most important bit.
Actually, it is. And sorry, just 1 minute, Amina, because there's something Maureen has said that resonates with me. You said shift in power, and I have been in this space and speaking to shift in power and what shift in power is. And I have to say that there are very, very many dynamics to shift in power. And there's always the fact that we need to recognize when people have power, it's inherent. you cannot just take it away, no matter how much you try. And in reference to the funding space, we have to be able to define roles. And this is where everybody's missing the conversation. What is the role of a funder? If you're in philanthropy, what is the role of philanthropy? If you're in the big government development organizations, what is the role of that? Is it necessarily channeling money? Pushing the money out of the door and making sure that you get people to be accountable or evaluate and stuff like that? Or do you have a role in making development work? Because channeling money is not work. This is what we're trying to refuse. What is your role? And when everybody starts playing their role, then the pieces start clicking.
But
then
can I challenge that a bit? How many grantees can you be able to do that with? What if you have a large portfolio of like 10, 12, 13 grantees all over the world?
So, first, I think I have so much of this content.
And first, there's
several layers. There's several layers to decolonization.
First of all, hold on.
Yes.
We're not even here to talk about funding. I know we can talk about that all day.
Yes.
The question that I had was bringing it back to unmothering, actually, because that's why you're here. But thinking about what the future would be, for example, with such organizations that don't have what you've just said, that don't meet due diligence criteria, and what that would look like. As a storyteller, I would want to continue doing unmothering the way unmothering does. But, there's difficulty, obviously. There's challenges that happen. One of them not only is just funding, obviously there's funding challenges, but then one big one is that we can't continue doing storytelling forever. We have to shift, the way you said, thinking about how that works, like going with what. So the question is not only shifting the priorities of the organization to suit the funder, but then also trying to meet due diligence criteria. So when do you sit down and, when we're talking about power dynamics, listen to the grantee when they're telling you, right now, I can no longer be on YouTube. I'm not now only going to do TikTok. So where does that shift? Where does that shift for you to start listening to the grantee in a way that they're the ones who understand what's going on, for you to be able to now guide them or fund more flexibly?
I actually want to say this before I let Caro speak, and intentionally so. No, because I always get to learn a lot from you when we speak quite a bit, but it's something that's been bothering me, and I'm glad you've asked that question. Last year, there's buzzwords again, localized funding. And I really asked, what is localized funding? Let's just, even just the two words, localized funding. Is it money that's been raised locally? Is it funding that's come from somewhere and is now being thrown into local organizations, regardless of the region? And then what qualifies as a local organization? Is it the one that has a presence or an office or a team within that region, but then are reporting back to another head office somewhere? But because the money has come to the local office, it's localized funding. I had so many questions. And everyone is out there looking for localized funding for grassroots organizations.
Funding that comes from the global north to the global south organizations.
And this is why I love feminists and why I love young feminists. Because they literally were like, fuck you and your localized funding. For years, development aid organizations have been looking for the perfect grantee, one who won't give them stress, one who won't defraud them, one where there's no corruption, one who has all these documents that you have, but almost, and it's proven over time, a lot of those organizations have become, they've become so,
donor babies.
They've perfected the art of meeting that criteria. It is no longer about the work.
They actually gatekeeping.
Exactly. And those are some of the effects of having that kind of a funding model. So I think the wider donor community realized a lot of money goes into spaces or to organizations where the work is being done at almost an administrative level, because those organizations then sub-grant to grassroots level organizations. And these are the organizations who literally don't even have an office. people who are sitting within the community being faced with the reality. You mentioned that people were calling you asking for help. How do you provide a proper mental wellness, psychosocial support system? Because your donor was telling you, tell me stories. But you've sold the stories. And now people are crashing mentally. So a lot of these grassroots organizations are faced with so many experiences that are not removed from the actual work that they do. But then they get such a small percentage of the money or the resourcing that's supposed to support their work. So I really struggled with the word localized funding, and I am more open to the conversation around unrestricted funding, because regardless of who gets that money, then they have carte blanche to make a difference. A lot of the young organizations need core or organizational or cooperational support, because you're asking this person to go to the field and interview, I don't know, teen mothers. This person probably didn't have breakfast. This person has been kicked out because your support does not cover payroll, does not cover rent.
Can I tell you a real
utilities?
scenario? That's like literally a real
Someone
scenario.
is walking in the field because you won't give transport reimbursement.
So literally it was that. Like, it's literally that. Can we talk about indirect cost funding? Like, can we talk about that? Like, so, is this a thing? Before you answer. And it's not a thing about...
We're also doing that buzzword thing. We're just throwing around words.
Okay. Let me talk about it
before Caro. Because I'm like, I'm telling you, this is
an example. Speaks, and we're not even going to use those buzzwords anymore. Use me as a case study. Use us as a case study.
Okay. Unmothering the
Woman. When that happened, when we did season 1 and then season 2, when we started now going to really the meat of things, talking about mother wounds, like, it was ridiculous how, and we're also talking about postpartum depression. That was a season we did about infant
mental
loss,
wellness,
mental health, and postpartum depression. It was a lot. So one thing happened. We were unable to, we as the team, we were 4 at the time, we were unable to even respond directly to people on social media, because we did not have the capacity or the training to be able to provide that psychosocial support. We were not there. We were not experts. We were not able to provide services to ourselves. So it was a lot for us, and it was a lot for the people that we're interviewing. That's number 1 and 2. Number 3, when you say, come, let's support you, we don't even have offices. We're a digital campaign. And that's where we are. Like, literally, there's not enough money for us to be able to do project costs, which go into production and all those other things, to allow us to even start thinking about taking a break, going to look for an office where we can tell people, come and receive psychosocial support from X. We don't have enough services and money to be able to tell people, we have partnered with this person to go and get these services from X. So there's either you're doing the work or you're not. So when you start thinking about how you're funding us, how people are funded in these spaces and calling us grassroots or local organizations or asking us for due diligence, and where's the time between the time when I put in my proposal to actually do the work? Where's the time for me to actually go and start looking for those due diligence documents when I have to be on the ground 24/7 and look for time and support to support these other people? So when we talk about even those buzzwords, don't touch me. When I start thinking about indirect costs and what, I'm like, where are even the costs?
Well, first, what do you even mean? I like Maureen's question. What are these
things that you're telling me? Fund me or don't fund me. It's as simple as that. Funding flexibly, indirect cost funding, decolonizing philanthropy. Those are just words don't reach where we are.
But I think
they affect where
they affect me 100%.
This is where I need to come in, because I struggle with the words myself. I have used them plenty. Because I have used them in the context of what I thought was the meaning. But I've come to realize that people have different definitions for these words, and they take them the way they want to take them. Like, you translate them, you interpret them the way you want to interpret them. But I don't care for the words. Whatever you call it localized, you call it decolonizing, you call it unrestricted funding, indirect funding, whatever you want to call it. Let's park that for a minute. Why do we have these words? The reason we have them is because people started realizing the problem with funding. There was funding, and funding was being done in a certain way. Then people started poking holes in that certain way, and people started realizing the problem with funding. Even the funders themselves, those who are open enough to see the problem, saw the problem. Hence the origin of let's now start throwing words around. What do we want the funding to change into? Then words started coming in and out. And what I keep telling people is that I feel like right now we're at a point where we have lost focus on what we were trying to address. It's a competition of who comes up with a better word. And it's annoying. When you talk about, let's even look at the dominant factor, unrestricted funding, indirect funding, localization. What is the dominant factor in there? Funders, could you stop deciding for organizations and for communities what they need and give them the money to decide how they can work within their own communities and their own structures? Funders, could you stop telling me how much I need to be earning or how much I need to allocate to developing a certain hospital for women who have fistula, whatever, call it, and we as a community can sit and decide, because we as a community have had our mechanisms long before you funders came about. You know, this was the idea. So if you're going to address that problem and you use all these other words you're going to use, me not caring about your English, I expect you to, at the end of the day, be able to transfer power. No, not fund me. If you're saying that is what you're doing, I need you to be able to give me the power to make the decision. This is the problem. Maureen, you have the money, 20 shillings. Okay. Caroline, I have the problem. I can show you what the problem is. Now, if I take your 20 shillings, I will address this problem from this front, this front, and this front. You bring the 20, we will manage the 20 within ourselves and be able to address this in this way. But the problem is, Maureen wants to come and say, and I'm using this as a hypothetical abstract. Maureen wants to come and say, I have 20, but I also have a strategy around your problem.
Your objectives.
And I also have objectives that I need to also meet. So I want you to see how you can align with my objectives. And then Maureen also comes and says, and I'm also realizing with my 20 that you don't write reports very well. But I'm also realizing with my 20 that no, I don't think you have sufficient financial muscle to handle my 20. So what I'm going to do is I need you to develop these several other things that I wanted to develop to manage my 20. So what is really happening is you are alleging to have transferred power to the community, but you haven't. You have thrown in a word, and now you're trying to use this word to tell them what they need to do, reverting to the original process that we are trying to address. And this is the problem with buzzwords. So when we talk about unmothering and when we bring it back to unmothering, this feels weird because I'm the one who funded it in the first place. This feels really, really weird. But the idea is, I had the money at that particular point. The space I was sitting in had that money and I was holding it. And I was like, look, Amina, you have this idea. So we're going to fund your idea, but we have to find a way in which it works so that it also satisfies
other things.
The other things that are on this front. But I was willing to take the burden as the funder.
And also the risk.
And
also the risk.
The whole essence, just to wind this up, the whole essence of unrestricted funding or indirect funding or funding ideas like Unmothering the Woman is for people to start recognizing that we need to bridge the gap. As funders, we need to step up and we need to stop doing the bare minimum because, like you said, we have the power, we have the money. You can go further than the person who doesn't have the money. You need to move. You need to start meeting people where they are and we need to start funding things that are making sense and stop ticking boxes.
Stop ticking boxes.
That's all I can say.
If that's all we've had today, stop ticking boxes.
Stop ticking boxes.
So I think I've asked all the questions that I need to ask, but the biggest one for me is and not just for unmothering, maybe thinking about what we've discussed about, the funding space, what other organizations need at this particular moment. But I'm going to bring it back to unmothering and just ask, what do you see the future of unmothering as? From the past, our journey maker, to our future maker. But it can be, we can start.
So that the future can speak. so Unmothering the Woman, like, Amina, you've always known this. For me, it's bigger than what we have done. I see it as something that is going to actually make impact and change the lives of women. Particularly, I'm going to speak to women, and even women and girls. The thing I love about Unmothering the Woman and the team on Unmothering the Woman is that we don't hold back. I like the way Maureen showed. The first season was very different from the
Yeah.
second season, the third season, the fourth season. And I'm happy that we have that flexibility to speak to what communities want and what our target audience wants. And that is what I see for Unmothering the Woman. We will keep evolving until we can speak for every woman who needs to be spoken for, or who needs to be given a platform to actually speak. That is the future for me.
Amen.
Oh yeah, and of course, moving geographically beyond what we are at.
Yeah. Beyond Africa, because I think we are in Africa.
Yeah. Well, I would have
From
to
the data.
pack it at Africa.
From the data that we have, we are like there's a lot of Africa there.
Yeah.
Just a very few Europe and
Yeah.
America, but like a lot of Africa.
Yeah.
And I think the guys who are from Europe, Europe, US is diaspora.
Yeah. And FYI, I looked at our audience rate when we were doing the first and the second season, and we reached a lot of African countries. We were barely not only in Kenya. Like I had people in South Africa, I had people in Nigeria telling me how you're doing a good job. So
Yeah. And really, that still is the feedback till now. Even for this season, there's a lot of excitement around, especially, I don't know, like the South Africans are very excited about what we're doing. But what do I see in terms of the future for Unmothering? I'm excited. Like Caroline has said, we've only just begun. And there's yet a lot more to be done. And again, the same two things you've said, we give agency for people to speak or create space for them to speak. And for those who truly don't have both, then we speak on their behalf. There's a question you asked me earlier, and I talked about acceptance. For people who work with other human beings, especially in the advocacy space or the human rights space or the human defender space, we get a lot of resistance because we just refuse to accept people for who they are.
yeah.
And I think accepting that, yes, we have a dope strategy for mothering, but also accepting, we could be speaking, I mean, the AI, for example, I know everyone keeps saying AI, I'm yet to understand how this will scale. If I don't see it in my everyday life, I still struggle to digest it. But that's what people are talking about right now. People are talking about cyborgs and machinery, and this is from the medical space where we are looking at science and technology supporting human beings, and everything is going to change about life as we know it, including what it means to be a mother or a parent. So I think as long as we stay open, I don't know what the future holds for me with my current role, but I mean, for as long as I'm seated there, if there's a way within which we can continue supporting the work that Mothering does, I think there'll always be room to support that.
Before you speak about your future, maybe she said something that caught my eye. AI, well, not about AI, but we are also evolving as Unmothering. And like we said, we're growing, we still are learning and growing. And one of the things that I've been doing is understanding virtual reality and storytelling. And maybe we might just be able to fuse in virtual reality and storytelling and Unmothering. We are the cool kids in the block.
We are, by the way, we are. And very good at shifting. Exactly. Good at shifting. Starting from 2020, when you were trying to do this documentary and couldn't, and then just did a digital storytelling. Like very, very good at shifting. For me, the future of Unmothering is simple. I want to tick a box for funders. I'm going to get ourselves registered. That's a big box that I'm going to try and tick, so that in case a funder comes along,
somebody out there is listening,
somebody comes out there and they're like, oh, do you have registration? We have all these safeguarding policies. We have them all. I'm going to tick all those boxes next year. That for me would be the first anti-feminist, anti-activist thing that I've ever done in my life, which is ticking a box, which I'm not, you know me, I don't like being in boxes. But so the future for us is very clear. The storytelling in us needs to be done more diligently by other people. One of the things that I feel very, very, very intensely about is that I want to, the way you said, shift power. For me, ethical storytelling is very, very key for me. And last year, when I was thinking about doing Sex for Water, the documentary, I visited some people in informal settlements, and one of them said something to me which I still carry with me. He said to me, "You facilitate me," meaning give me money, "and I will tell you any story you want to hear." And for me, that hit home because the person who was with me said, "It's because you're not from here. Whether or not you're a Kenyan, whether or not, but you don't belong in that particular community.
Yeah.
So you're an outsider. Whether or not you speak the language, you're still an outsider. So they view you as an outsider. So when you come in, he will tell you any story you want to hear. However, so my thought was, how about I give those people power and agency and give them cameras and listen to the stories that they give us. So for me, it's about shifting storytelling to the people who actually want to tell their stories and give them the power to do that. So Unmothering is going far. I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm trying to build a table with seats. Whoever is going to be invited is going to be invited to that table. If you don't have access, this is the table for you. So that's where we're planning on going and telling those stories to everyone. So that's all I wanted to ask you guys.
Could I just say that we're ticking the boxes?
We are ticking the boxes.
But still fighting the boxes.
I don't know if I want to fight the box. I don't think I'm ready to fight the box. I don't have enough money to fight the box. Give me money so I can fight boxes. No, Fanda, if you're listening. I'm not fighting you. Caro is fighting, but me, I'm not. Yeah, but
no, but I
true.
think the unmothering itself is a radical act in fighting that box. Honestly, if you just listen to the conversation we've had from how it started to how we've operated to how we've been able to put out content, it's literally finding a way where, how do I say this? Our storytelling, Unmothering as a project in itself is a practical example of how not fitting into the box would look like if somebody just took a chance. And I'm not saying that even from an administrative level, we're being reckless with the due diligence that Caroline said. We're not saying that. It is looking at flexibilities in allowing entities like Unmothering still get support and get the work done. And I think from a development aid perspective, those are the things that need to change. Those are the things for me that need to change.
But then also shifting power. Shifting power and listening.
But in the next episode, maybe we need to talk about trust-based philanthropy and what trust-based funding and what trust-based funding looks like.
Again with the words.
I'm going to end it there. I'm going to end it there because we are going to start another season of Tandaza Mkeka with hopefully inviting both of you back. Where we can talk about these buzzwords and we can talk about any other things that we feel are important for women and girls and also for mothers, I guess. Motherhood, parenting, what that looks like. But this was a special episode, literally to show our journey, where we've come, and our future, where we're going. And I'm so glad that you took the time to sit with me today and hope other people find it valuable as well. And hopefully next time, there will be more opportunities for us to let us know what you're doing, other than unmothering, other than, just trust-based philanthropy and things like that and those buzzwords. But thank you so much. And we're looking forward to having you back in season 2. Thank you so much for being with us throughout this entire season of Tandaza Mkeka. The audio-visual podcast, you can find it on YouTube as Tandaza Mkeka, on Unmothering the Woman YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn as at Unmothering the Woman. Have I left out anything? Only on Twitter, we are UnmotherKE. Don't know why, but follow us there as well. We give you live updates every single Wednesday, I think. We hit you up with a new episode, but this one is our final one. And thank you so much for being with us this whole entire season. We will be back next season, 2024. Thank you.